Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things and welcome to another video. And today I'm going to be talking about some very famous books and whether or not I have read them. I feel like I need to work out a snappier way to say that in the video title, but you know, we'll get there. So this is a slightly random video, but a while ago someone commented and asked if I would make a video about really famous classics that I haven't read or that I don't want to read. And I was trying to work out how I could do that in a sensible way. And I thought what I might do is go through one of those like 100 books to read before you die list and see what I have read and what I haven't read, and of the ones that I haven't read, how interested I am in reading them, because I thought that might be quite interesting. So I've pulled up a list. I think the list I've got is one from Readsy, because there are obviously millions of hundred of books to read before you die lists on the internet. But I thought I would go through this list, see what I've read, what I haven't, what I want to read or don't want to read out of the ones that I haven't read so far. So, you know, slightly different video format, but might be interesting to do it for a change. I am going to move over to my desk where I can look at my computer more easily, and I will try and do a split screen thing so you can see my computer and the list of books as I go. And you know, we're just going to see how this video goes. Could be a bit different, but hopefully relatively interesting. We will see. So I don't know if the lighting is going to be terrible because I don't usually film in this spot, but we're gonna go with it because now I can look at my computer more easily. My camera's also on books rather than a tripod for a change, back to the old days. So we'll see how this goes, but it's fine. So looking at my list of 100 books to read before you die. And number one, we have 1984 by George Orwell, which I have read. And number two, we have The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, which I haven't read, but I do have on my shelf. So that is definitely one I want to read at some point in the future, and that I will probably read within the next year. I will read it soon. And number three, we have The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which again, I have already read and I really like. And number four, The Alchemist. So I haven't read this, but I have heard of this. And this is one I would quite like to read. I feel like this is one that I would vaguely like to read, but I don't have any immediate intentions of reading it, I would say. But I have heard good things. At number five, we have The Adelph and Other Stories by Borges. So I don't know if I've specifically read The Adelph and Other Stories, but I have read quite a lot of stories by Borges. So I feel like I've probably covered off that one enough. I like Borges a bit, but I find his stories a little bit too like literary and experimental for me, so I'm not sure how much more by him I will read in the future. And number six, we have Animal Farm by George Orwell, which I have read and do like. And at number seven, we have Aesop's Fables by Aesop, obviously, which I have read and I quite enjoyed, but I didn't get masses out of. And number eight, we have Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll, which I have read and I do enjoy. And number nine, we have Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. I have read this and I love it very much. I really do like Anna Karenina. And number 10, we have Anne of Green Gables by L.N. Montgomery, which I have read and again I did like. At number 11, we have As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner, which I haven't read and I'm potentially curious to read. I have heard great things about William Faulkner, but I also feel like his books are going to be a bit miserable, so do I want to read lots of them? I don't know. Oh yes, no, I do remember what this one is about. I have heard it before. It's about a family taking like the matriarch of their family across America in order to bury her in her hometown. I feel like I've heard excellent things about this from someone on BookTube, and I can't remember who because it was quite a while ago, but maybe this is one I need to read at some point in the future. At number 12, we have Beloved by Toni Morrison, which I read in 2020 and I thought was great. I really was impressed by it, and I would like to read more by Toni Morrison in the future. At number 13, The Book Thief by Markus Zusak, which I have read and I do really like. I haven't read it for about 15 years, but I did enjoy it as a teenager. At number 14, we have Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which I have read. I read it last year and I quite liked it. I really liked the premise more than the plot, but I did find it really interesting. At number 15, I have The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky, which I haven't read. I have read his novel Crime and Punishment about 15 years ago probably, maybe 12 years ago, and I liked it at the time a lot, but I remember very little about it. So I would like to read some more Dostoevsky at some point. I feel like he definitely needs to be on my list. At number 16, we have Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. I think it's set during the Second World War. I don't know too much more about it. I don't feel a burning need to read Catch-22 anytime soon, but nor do I not want to read it. So I feel like it's the kind of book that I'm not necessarily going to pick up on my own, but if someone at some point really recommends it to me and says I should read it, maybe I will. And number 17, we have The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. This is another one that I haven't read, and I don't know if I really want to read The Catcher in the Rye. I feel like it's one of those books that I hear people say you should read it when you're a teenager or when you're like in your early 20s, and if you haven't read it by the time you're a bit older, you should just not read it because you won't get as much out of it if you're not an angsty teenager when you read it. I feel like that's what I've heard people say about Catcher in the Rye, and I feel like I'm past that age now. Maybe at some point I will read it. I don't think it's very long, and I might be intrigued to read it, but I wouldn't say it is especially high up on my list. So, you know, probably going to leave Catcher in the Rye, but we will see. At number 18, we have Charlie and the Chocolate Factory by Roald Dahl, which I have read when I was a child. I don't remember it very well, but I feel like I liked it. At number 19, we have Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Again, I have read this as a child. I think I must have been 8 or something, 9 in primary school, so a very long time ago. I liked it. I don't remember it very much at all. At number 20, we have The Call of the Wild by Jack London, which I didn't love, to tell the truth. Not really my favourite book ever, but there we go. At number 21, we have The Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. So I haven't read this one, but I would really like to. I've heard really great things about this, and it sounds really, really intriguing. I think it's a mid-20th century dystopian novel, I think, which sounds really interesting. I wish this list had years of publication dates. Anyway, I think this would be a really interesting read. I feel like I've always heard great things about it, and I do quite like a dystopian read, so maybe A Clockwork Orange is one that needs to be on my list. At number 22, we have The Code of the Woosters by P.G. Wodehouse. So I haven't read this one, but I have read quite a lot of the Jeeves and Wooster books, so I'm sure I will read Code of the Woosters at some point. I just need to like get further on in the series. And then at number 23, we have The Collected Edgar Allan Poe. So I have read some short stories by Edgar Allan Poe, by which I mean I have read The Telltale Heart. Have I actually read anything else? I think possibly, but not since I was at school, so not for a long time. I would quite like to read more by Edgar Allan Poe, so maybe I need to put more of his books on my list. At number 24, we have The Colour Purple by Alice Walker. This is a truly amazing book. I read The Colour Purple in 2020, and it was one of my favourite books of the year. I love it a lot. It will always be one of my favourites. It is a truly, truly wonderful book. Probably one of the best modern classics in my opinion. At number 25, we have Coraline by Neil Gaiman, which I've also read and quite enjoyed. At number 26, we have The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. I've also read this. I also thought it was fantastic. Really, really wonderful. Highly recommend it. At number 27, we have Crime and Punishment, again by Dostoevsky. As I already mentioned, I have read this, though not for like 14 years. I feel like every time I say this, I'm changing the year. Not for a long time. So I did like it at the time, but I don't remember it very well. Maybe I will reread it sometime. Here we have at number 28, The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Again, I have read this, again, not since I was at school, so I did really enjoy this at the time, but I don't remember it super well. Next, The Death of Artemio Crooks. This is a book that I've never heard of before, so I haven't read it. I don't know anything about it, but you know, maybe it needs to be on my list if it's on a list of 100 books before you die. I think this is the first book on the list that I haven't heard of. I haven't heard of the author either. So interesting, maybe one that I need to read. At number 30 is Diary of a Madman and Other Stories by Lu Xun. So I haven't read this, but I do have it on my shelf. At least I have his selected stories, which I assume would include Diary of a Madman if it's his most famous, which this suggests. I am looking forward to reading Lu Xun a lot later this year, so really looking forward to those. And number 31 is Anne Frank's Diary, which I have read, not again for a really long time. I read this as a teenager. And number 32 is The Divine Comedy by Dante. I haven't read this. I'm not sure I ever will. I think epic, very old poetry is not like my thing really, and I'm not sure whether I will ever read The Divine Comedy. At number 33 we have Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. So I haven't read Don Quixote, but I think I would probably quite like to. I feel like Don Quixote is one of those very old classics that I'm more interested in than some of the others. So, you know, maybe one day I'll read Don Quixote, I don't know. It wouldn't be like super high on my list, but I feel like it would definitely be one that I'd be interested in reading. Number 34, we have Dracula by Bram Stoker, which I have read and I don't really like. At number 35, we have Emma by Jane Austen, which I have read and I love. At number 36, we have Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury, which I or have also read and also love. It is really fantastic, wonderful dystopian book. At number 37, we have Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, which I have read and I really, really like. At number 38, we have The Giver by Lois Lowry. So I haven't read this, but I have heard of this. And I have heard that it's really good. So maybe this is one I need to read sometime. At number 39, we have Northern Lights by Philip Pullman. It is not called The Golden Compass. And this is a wonderful, wonderful book. The first in a fantastic series, which I love, and I highly recommend them. I feel like it should say His Dark Materials though, not just the first book in the series, because the whole series is great. At number 40, we have Goodnight Moon by Margaret Wise Brown. I have never heard of this and I have not read it, and it's a children's book, so I'm not sure that that's one that for me to read anytime soon. At number 41, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. I have read, it is wonderful. Number 42, The Great Gatsby by S. Scott Fitzgerald, another book that I have read and really like. Next we have Grimm's Fairy Tales. I've probably read some of Grimm's Fairy Tales, but I haven't read them all the way through. Maybe I will sometime. I don't really feel a burning need to read all of Grimm's Fairy Tales. I feel like I've been exposed to some of them, so that's fine. Next, Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. I have read this. Again, I read this as a teenager, probably when I was 17 years old. I didn't love Gulliver's Travels. It was fine, but it wasn't anything especially exciting for me, but that's fine, just not really my kind of book. For me, novels get good around Jane Austen's time, and before Jane Austen I'm less excited, and that's fine. Next is Hamlet by William Shakespeare, which I have read. Have I read it? I've seen Hamlet. I don't actually know if I've read it physically, but I might have done. I really like Hamlet though. I've seen it a couple of times and I love it. It's one of my favourite Shakespeare plays. Next is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood, which I have read and I do like. Next is Harry Potter. Again, I read these as a teenager and reread them in my early 20s, I think. Next, Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I have read. I studied this at university, but it's been quite a long time since I read it and I don't remember it very well. Next, Here's to You, Juzea. I have not read this book and I have not heard of it. This is a Mexican classic apparently. I don't think I've read any Mexican classics, so maybe this is one that needs to go on my list. Not one that I've heard of, but sounds interesting. Next is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I think I read this as a teenager, but I'm not 100% certain. It's one of those books that I feel like I did read them, but I remember them so little that I might not have read them. I might have just thought about reading them, but if I did read them I was probably about 15. I would quite like to reread the series at some point. I think it would be quite fun. At number 51 is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have not read this. I have not actually read any of the Lord of the Rings books, which I feel is a bit shocking, especially as I do quite like fantasy and I do like the Lord of the Rings films. I feel like one of these days I should read some Tolkien, but I haven't yet. Next is Holes. I have read this, not for a long time. I think I read this when I was 12 at school. We studied it at school. I feel like nearly everyone in Britain my age studied this at school. And yeah, I remember liking this, but it was a very long time ago that I read it. Next, Hopscotch by Julio Cortázar. This is not a novel that I have heard of before or read. I just quickly googled it and apparently it's an Argentinian classic. The fact that it says it's divided into 155 chapters which can be read in lots of different orders actually sounds quite interesting. So I feel like I might quite like to read this. That sounds quite fun, but yeah, not one I've heard of. Next is The Iliad by Homer. I have not read this. Again, I'm not sure that epic poetry is really my thing. I feel like I would be more interested to read the Iliad than the Divine Comedy. I feel like as a teenager I bought myself a copy of the Iliad intending to read it and never did. So maybe one day. Next is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This is definitely one I want to read. I've heard about this a lot and I feel like I always hear great things about this, but I just haven't got around to it yet, so definitely one that I do want to read. Next, to Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I have read it. I love it very, very much. Next, Journey to the Centre of the Earth by Jules Verne. I have read this and I quite liked it, but I didn't like it nearly so much as Around the World in 80 Days. And I did enjoy it, but I was just quite disappointed in comparison to Around the World in 80 Days, so maybe that'll turn up later on this list, I don't know, but not the best Jules Verne in my opinion. Next is Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I have read this. I read this as a teenager because, 15-year-old Katie decided it was a great idea to read Les Miserables. And you know what, it was because I loved it very much. And I probably had more time in my life and felt like it wasn't so pressured to read a 1,000-page novel, whereas now I feel like I would feel the pressure because I wouldn't be reading all the other books. Anyway, I love Les Miserables hugely and it is fantastic. And one day I do want to reread it, but it's very long, so we will see. Next is Life of Pi by Jan Martel. I have read this. I read this again as a teenager. I really liked Life of Pi when I read it at the age of like 16. I don't remember it too well, so I would like to read it again at some point, but I did really enjoy it when I was young. Next is The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, which again I read as a child, probably when I was like 10. I don't remember it very well, but I like the story, and I enjoyed it at the time, so that's fine. The Little Prince, yes, I have read this. I read this a couple of years ago, relatively recently, and I did quite enjoy it. I feel like I might have enjoyed it more if I'd read it when I was younger, but I still quite liked it. Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, I read when I was probably about 12, 13, and I enjoyed it at the time, but I haven't read it since. Would be interested to reread it again sometime. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, I haven't read, and I don't really know that I want to, because obviously it's not a great subject matter, and I know that everyone says it is a fantastic novel because of the way that it works and because of the writing, and obviously you're not supposed to like Humbert, but I do feel like I would rather read something else by Vladimir Nabokov if I'm going to read something by him than Lolita. And maybe if I think he is really incredible and I want to read all of his works, I would read Lolita. But I don't feel like it's one that I especially want to read. Next is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, as I already mentioned. I have not read this and I would like to. I really should. I have them on audiobook, so I should just listen to them sometime, but I haven't yet. But I think I might like them, but we will see. Next, Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. I probably don't want to read this. I read his book 100 Years of Solitude last year, and there were some things about it that I found quite interesting, but it wasn't for me, really. So I don't think I'm likely to read many more of his books. I think they're just a bit too complicated and strange for me. I'm not sure. I don't think he's massively a writer for me. Next, Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. I have read this and I didn't think it was very good. And I don't know if that's that controversial an opinion, because I feel like it's very lauded, but also I buddy read it with 2 other people and none of us liked it. And I didn't think it was very good, but that's fine. Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I feel like I might have read a bit of it, possibly at school, like an extract. Maybe even all of it. I've definitely read the bit where he wakes up as an insect, actually, now that I think about it. I have read that. Did I read it at school but not in full, or did I read all of it and have just forgotten? I don't know. But if I haven't read it all already, then I'm not feeling terribly fussed to. Number 68, Moby Dick by Herman Melville. I'm probably never going to read Moby Dick, which I feel a bit sad about, and I'll tell you why I'm not going to read Moby Dick. It's because I have a terrible phobia of fish, which is a really weirdly specific phobia, but I'm really, really freaked out by fish. Like, I feel like the reason why I really didn't like the only book by Hemingway I've read, The Old Man and the Sea, was because it was all about a man fishing and I just couldn't handle it. And I know that Moby Dick is about whale hunting and whales aren't technically fish, but as far as my phobia is concerned, they are giant fish, and I do not want to read a book about chasing giant fish. That sounds horrible. I can't. Oh, no, I do not want to read Moby Dick, which is a shame because I feel like everything I've heard about it in terms of how it explores like gender and like masculinity sounds fantastic, but I don't want to read a book about giant fish, and I think that's fair enough. Next, Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which I have read. I read this last year, 2020. I quite liked it. I've read 2 books by Virginia Woolf now, 2 of her novels, and I don't love modernist literature that much, so whether I will read much more by her in the future, I don't know. Possibly not, but I did find Mrs. Dalloway interesting. Number 70, Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. Excellent book. I love it very, very much. Have indeed read, of course. Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I have read, and I didn't love, controversially. I didn't get very much out of it at all. I didn't find it very impactful. Next, The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. As I've already mentioned, I did not enjoy this book, and whether that was because I didn't get on with Hemingway's writing style or just because it was about a man fishing and I can't stand fish, I don't know, but I did not like it. Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens, I have obviously read. I love Dickens a lot, but Oliver Twist is my least favourite book by Dickens. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. As I already mentioned, I have read this and I found it interesting, but I didn't really love it. I feel like it was a bit too strange for me, but that's fine. 1001 Nights. I haven't read this, but I would really like to. This is definitely one I'd be interested to read, so I feel like this is higher on my list. Definitely like higher on my list than Grimm's fairy tales when it comes to like myths and legends, I suppose. So I would quite like to read this sometime. A Passage to India by Ian Forster. I have indeed read, and I do think it is fantastic, and I highly recommend it. Ian Forster is wonderful. This next book, Pedro Paramo. I haven't heard of this or read it before. This is a Colombian classic, apparently. Not one I've heard of, so not one I'm like immediately moving to read, but sounds like it might be interesting. I might look it up after this video. Next, The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster. Well, I have read this when I was about 8, 9. I don't remember it at all, but I remember that I really liked it. I do remember vaguely that there was a dog with a clock on him, but very little much more than that. It was fun, I thought, as a child. Pippi Longstockings. So I haven't read Pippi Longstockings, but I did used to watch the TV programme as a child and enjoy them, so maybe sometime I should read the books, but, you know, I'm probably a bit old for them now. Next, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I have read it. It is one of my favourite books of all time. The Remains of the Day by Ishiguro. Have read it. Also one of my favourite books of all time. Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. I'm not sure I have read Romeo and Juliet physically, but I have seen it on stage a couple of times, and I quite like it, but I think there are better Shakespeare plays. Next, A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I have read all of them. I read them as a teenager, and I really liked them. I would quite like to reread them, actually. They're great. The Shadow of the Wind. I have not read this, but I have heard really good things, so I feel like this is one that I would like to read. I feel like this is on my list. Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. I have not read this, but I would really like to. This is definitely on my list, and Marissa from Blatantly Bookish has been telling me to read some Kurt Vonnegut for ages, so I should actually read this. Next, The Sound of the Mountain. I have not read this. This is a Japanese classic, and I really like Japanese classics, but I haven't actually heard of this one, so definitely this needs to go on my list, and one I will try and read at some point soon. The Stranger by Albert Camus. I have not read, and I kind of don't really feel any need to. I have in my head that it might be a bit pretentious, which is maybe unfair of me, and maybe it's not really philosophical and dense, but that's what I have in my head, so I don't feel especially drawn to that, but let me know if I'm wrong. Tales of Genji. I would quite like to read this. This is a very early Japanese classic as well, and like I said, I am quite interested in Japanese history and literature, so definitely one I should read at some point, I think. Things Fall Apart. I have read this one. I read this at university and studied it. I didn't love it at the time, but I was quite young. I feel like I might like it more if I read it now, kind of knowing what to expect more. I don't know. The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. I have not read, but I have read The Count of Monte Cristo by him, and I loved it, so I would like to read The Three Musketeers in the future, definitely. To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I have read this. I read this at school. Also thought it was great. Treasure Island. I have read. I didn't think it was that great, but you know, I've liked other stuff by him, but Treasure Island was a bit dull for me, but that's fine. My camera ran out of battery, so I don't know if I was at the same place what I was, but you know. We'll go from Ulysses. So Ulysses by James Joyce, I haven't read, and I don't really feel the need to read. Like, I read Dubliners a while ago, and it was fine, but I didn't really get very much out of it, and I feel like that's supposed to be his most like accessible thing, so I feel like I'm not too fussed by James Joyce. Those kind of modernist things, not necessarily my cup of tea. War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, I have read, and I love it. I think it is great. Watership Down by Richard Adams, I have read, and I did quite like it, although I really feel that it's not a children's book, like it is so dark. Winnie the Pooh, I think I have read some of the Winnie the Pooh books as a child, but I'm not really certain. I would be quite interested to read them as an adult. The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, I have read, but I read it when I was about 15 and I don't actually remember it very well, so sometime perhaps I should reread it. Number 98, getting near the end, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I have not read this. I have seen the film. I would be quite interested to read it actually, because I feel like it's probably quite different from the film and it's quite an interesting world, so sometime maybe. A Wrinkle in Time. I haven't read this. I have heard about it. Maybe I will read it sometime. I don't know. Sounds like an interesting read. And finally, number 100, Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. I have read and I love it very much. One of my favourite books ever. And that's it. I haven't been keeping a tally of how many I've read, but I will put the number on the screen now so you can see. As you can see, some that I'm interested in reading that I haven't read, and some that I am not too fussed about reading in the future. And that, I think, is probably all for now. Thank you very much for watching. Do let me know if there were any of the books that I have said I haven't read that I really should read. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.